Okay, hi everyone, I'm Jenna Schulman. I'm a college counselor in Northern New Jersey. In case this is your first one that you are tuning into, I guide students independently, privately throughout the whole application process. And a big part of what I do is help students with their college list. So all throughout the summer, I am doing these spotlight events to talk to different colleges across the country to learn more about the academics and student life and financial aid and admissions and everything in between. And I have an organization on today that features 44 colleges. Is that correct?
Correct.
Good. 44 colleges, so you're not just hearing about one, which is super cool. And I love the colleges that change lives because there are schools that you might not have heard of that are great and rewarding and offer something really unique and special for students. And part of what I do is to make sure that schools like this get on students' lists when appropriate and let them know about these schools because they really are these hidden gem colleges. I visited a few on my own personally, and they have such a great student emphasis, great price point in so many ways, and they offer something for students, especially ones that might want a little bit more personal attention, smaller class sizes, because they are liberal arts colleges. So I have the leader of the pack today of the colleges that change lives, Maria Furtado. So I'm pleased to introduce her, and she will do her best to give you the overview of these 44 colleges that will change your life. So I will turn it over to you now, and I'll monitor the question and answer. So if anyone has any questions, type them in and we can get to them at the end.
Super. Thank you very much, Jenna. I appreciate it. Thanks, people, for being here. I'm going to do this in a less traditional way. So I'm sure you'll be terribly disappointed to know that there is not a PowerPoint filled with fascinating amounts of data. But what we have is instead, I have this slideshow, and it's got 600 plus pictures from the colleges that I work with. And I'm going to do a share. Whoops, I'm going to do it wrong first, but then I'm going to do a share. And I'm going to share screen and give you a chance to see some of these pictures, because I think that in some ways that's a much better way for us to go at this. These schools, it's not just that they're beautiful, but many of them are incredibly beautiful. It's not just about that. It's about the idea that the relationships that you build are different, and these schools are different than other places that you might look at, the ones that jump up on our radar right away. What you're going to notice in a lot of these pictures is, because they're college pictures, you're going to notice a lot of happy people. So that, we all know that that's going to happen in every piece or any website that you look at when it comes to colleges. But I think that what I'd like to talk about with these schools is basically where Jenna started, is these are small schools. We have 44 colleges in 26 states, and they are all relatively small. The smallest one probably has about 300 or 400 students. Largest one probably has about 3,500 students, maybe 3,700 students. And they're built small on purpose because they are built so that there is a relationship between the students and the faculty that is easy because it is consistent and constant. So all the classes are going to be taught by faculty. You're not going to have TAs who are on their way to a PhD or teaching assistants who are doing this because that's how they make a little money while they get their master's degree before they go off to do something in corporate America. You are going to be taught by people who want to teach. And they want to teach 18 to 22-year-olds. So this is why they are where they are. They have made a professional and personal commitment to being on this type of campus. And so that connection is very different. It's not so much that you have to chase someone down to find information and to be guided and mentored. They are going to want to mentor and guide. So they are going to try to pull you in whenever they can. And that's different than it is at some big institutions where you are really part of a group of people who are trying to be processed from point A to point B. This is not about processing kids through. This is about educating people for a lifetime. These are places that talk about big questions and big issues. So if you look at the way that they're talking about what's happening with coronavirus, they're not just talking about how do we keep our campus clean and keep our people safe, but they are talking about the inequities that come with this type of an issue, with this kind of pandemic. The inequities that inevitably happen, where privileged people are more likely to have care, more likely to have access to testing. Those people who need more help, who have less privilege and less options and less opportunity are the ones that are going to be struggling. And they want to ask the question, why, and how can we fix that? And so that's a different kind of approach to education than you might see in some other places. The goal here is to educate the student, yes, over 4 years, to send them out with a degree, but it's also really to develop a love of learning so that these students will leave hoping, we hope, that they will be ready to go out into the workforce and really have impact and have influence. But you'll notice from these pictures that we still think that the experience can be fun, because right as I said that about big social impact, they came up with New College's sailing program, which is a really well done program. The two schools that we have in Florida, Eckerd College and New College of Florida, both offer really strong sailing programs. So I think I'm going to start poking holes in some of the myths that we have about liberal arts colleges. So number one, liberal arts colleges are typically small, very true. Too small, not necessarily, but typically small. They are also not only for liberals, because that liberal college, liberal arts college, liberal education thing tends to throw people off and they think, oh, well, it's only for liberals. That is not the case. We have several schools, probably 6 or 8 schools that I would consider conservative, socially, politically conservative. And for students who want that, there are super options. Hillsdale College in Michigan, Wheaton College in Illinois, St. Olaf College up in Minnesota, probably a little bit more conservative, although all the people I know from there are not conservative. But Birmingham Southern in Birmingham, Alabama, Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi, Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, certainly schools that are more conservative. On the other end of the spectrum, which is one of the things I love about this group, we have Antioch College in Ohio, Hampshire College in Massachusetts, Guilford College in North Carolina, Earlham College in Indiana, as well as Clark University in Massachusetts, and Eckerd College in Florida, New College in Florida, Evergreen State College in Washington State, who are way on the other end of the political spectrum. Absolutely schools where liberal thought and liberal way of doing things is very, very much the campus ethos. So there's a range of that political and social acceptance and that political and social atmosphere on campus. The other thing that tends to be a myth about liberal arts colleges is the whole idea that you can't do science there. It's not for science, it's only for arts and humanities and social sciences. But if you're noticing a lot of these pictures are people in labs doing science every day. And the difference at these schools is those labs are taught by faculty. They're taught by faculty from day one. The people who are leading any type of study groups are typically our faculty. So you're not getting taught, again, by those TAs who are on their way to be faculty. These schools do the full range of all the sciences, starting with all the pre's, pre-med, pre-dental, pre-optician, pre-pharmacy, all of the pre's. And then biology, biochem, physics, math, chemistry, computer science, environmental science, neuroscience, PT, OT, physical therapy, occupational therapy. All of those are available at some mix of our schools. Nursing and direct nursing with great clinical programs are available at all of these schools. So that idea that you can't do science is wrong. The other great part about doing science at this kind of school is that the research opportunities are available to the undergrads. They're not just for graduate students. These opportunities are available for undergrads. And so you are in the lab from the first day, available to do science research with faculty from the very beginning. And that's really the goal, is to get people to get their hands in there, get their hands messy, and understand what it really means to do science. Another thing I hear a lot is that these schools are, they're all expensive, no one can afford to go, there are very few people. And that, again, is not true, because these schools will truly try to fund you as well as possible. We do have 2 schools that base almost all of their scholarship money on need. So Reed College in Portland, Oregon, only does need-based aid, no merit-based aid. Bard College in New York, north of the city, they do 2, as in 1-2, not 2 kinds, but as in 1-2 scholarships that are based on merit, but the rest of their awards are given based on need. Now, the rest of the schools do a mix of need-based aid and merit-based aid. And we also have 3 schools that have done tuition setbacks. So St. John's College has set back their tuition, as has Birmingham Southern and Hiram College. And Hiram College is in Ohio. They also offer a 3-year degree, a 3-year bachelor's. So they are one of the schools that offer some interesting options, a 3-year option. They set their tuition back, and they also have direct admit They have a 7-year program, I should say, with the medical school. So there's a lot of interesting pieces to these schools. All these schools will do their best to fund the students. I did a session with 2 of the Texas schools, Southwestern University just outside Austin, and Austin College, which is just outside Dallas, of course, and Hendrix College in Arkansas, as well as St. John's in New Mexico. And each of those schools offers aid to 100% of the students that they admit. So you're really looking at an affordability piece that is different than what we tend to think. These schools mix and match when it comes to the academic process. There are lots of schools that do a very traditional semester, 1 semester spring, 1 semester fall. There are several that do in a non-pandemic year, 4-1-4, 4 courses in the fall, 1 course in January, 4 courses in the spring. Many of these schools, actually, it's getting to be that I really can't say many of these schools, probably close to 20 of these schools are among the group of schools across the country that have adjusted their plans for the fall of 2020. So they have students returning much earlier than they typically do. So students are going back anywhere from the 2nd or 3rd week in August, first-year students as well. And they will be doing maybe 1 course for 10 weeks, 2 courses, and then, or they're doing their semester condensed and will be done when they go home for Thanksgiving break, or they will be going home for Thanksgiving break, and then after that, they will have just 1 week of classes and then finals, something along those lines. So many of these schools, Center, Lawrence, Earlham, Eckerd, Ohio Wesleyan, Emory and Henry, a bunch of these schools have already changed their plan for the fall to make sure that students, faculty, staff are as safe as possible. Because colleges are interesting communities. If you have been in any kind of a boarding school, or if you know people who go to college, I mean, you basically live in the same place, you eat in the same place, and you study in the same place. And so there's a lot of together. And so schools are working very hard to figure out how they can keep everyone safe. We know that the coronavirus doesn't really tend to typically affect the 18 to 22-year-old population, but faculty are not 18 to 22. And neither are the folks who work in the cafeteria and on the grounds, and everyone has extended family, or many of us have extended family who may have health issues. So the schools are being super careful about how they bring students back on campus. Everyone, like St. Mary's in California, just here in the Bay Area, they have a 3-part plan. It's all on campus, hybrid, and all online. So it's a mix of all of those pieces and how they'll bring students back to campus this fall. Again, trying to make sure that everyone is as safe as possible. And they will really try to make this work for everybody that they can. I think what's interesting is that for students who were already on campus and had already met their faculty, rolling over to going online was hard, but not as hard as it would be if you had never met those people in person. So I think that's where the colleges are really working hard to make sure that the return to campus for returning students is strong, but also that building of connection happens right away for first-year students, so that they are really going to be there making a real connection with each other as well as with faculty and staff. I know some people have asked the question, well, what if all these fall 2020 kids defer and then there's no spaces left for fall 21s, which is probably what a lot of you are, as rising seniors going into the senior year, just finished the junior year. And I think that not as many people are deferring as we expect. And I think that sometimes what happens is people say, well, I'll defer and go to community college and take care of some required courses. And that is a path. However, it's really important to remember that for most colleges, once you take classes after you get out of high school, you've now become a transfer and you have to apply again differently. So I think that that has pushed people back from that whole idea of I'll just defer. It has shifted the way that we've all looked at college, certainly. But I think that you will find that not as many people will ultimately defer as we might have thought based on kind of the general conversation we're hearing out and about in the news and online. I think that one of the other things that's interesting is many of these schools are in smaller towns or in kind of in extended suburbs. So Allegheny, for example, is in the town of Meadville, but Memphis, which is where Rhodes College is a city. So a lot of these schools are older institutions that were put in small towns on purpose. They were put there so that the community of the campus became the students' community, and the community around the campus became part of the campus family. And so you'll see that a lot of these schools are in smaller towns and cities. What you will also see, though, is that the faculty and staff and the administration of these schools recognize that it is 2020. It is not 1820 or 1920 when some of these schools came into being. Students expect to be to have cities accessible. They expect to have internships and externships available. And so all of these colleges are very thoughtful and very careful about making sure that you connect with alumni, that you connect with donors, that you connect with internship coordinators around the country and around the world to make sure that you have the opportunities that you need. You will notice many of these pictures that are floating by are also of students studying abroad. And so this is a big piece of the campus experience for these schools, especially places like Goucher College, Eckerd College, Cornell College, Centre College. A lot of these schools have highly emphasized that experience of studying abroad and really having a chance to see the world, but within either a structured program or within a travel that is affiliated with your institution. So I think that's a really important piece. The schools overall as a group, more schools are Division III when it comes to athletics. That's another thing that people tend to think, oh, you can't play a sport at a liberal arts college. Sure you can. One of our schools, St. Mary's College of California, here in the Bay Area, is Division I. Two of our schools, Hillsdale College in Michigan and Eckerd College in Florida, are Division II. All the other schools that have athletics, varsity athletics, are Division III. And then some places just have a couple of different things. So for example, at St. John's in Annapolis, they have sailing and croquet. And croquet is their big thing that they do on campus every spring. They play against the Naval Academy, which is literally across a big park or green from their campus. And then St. John's in Annapolis, they have a big, huge hiking and outdoor program, and they also have a really strong archery program. So some of these places have the unexpected. St. Lynchburg, for example, has a huge disc golf program, and so there's people who are really ultimate frisbee and disc golf people on campus most of the time, really very active. There is also sometimes a concern that, for example, well, what medical school will know these schools, or what law school, or what graduate school? And the thing that I would like to tell you is that grad schools, law schools, med schools, they love kids from these programs because they're super prepared. They are really very prepared for graduate school. They write well, they think well, they, for lack of another way to put it, they play well with others, so they typically have very good interpersonal skills. And there are a handful of these schools that run their own grad programs. So for example, Clark University, Worcester, Massachusetts runs its own graduate programs, but it does not dominate the campus. But you will see, for example, Juniata College in Huntington, Pennsylvania, med schools love their kids. They love their kids. Rhodes College in Memphis has a super strong connection to St. Jude's Hospital in Memphis. So a lot of their kids can do internships and research there, and they have the opportunity to really get a leg up on what others are doing. Many of these schools have on-campus rescue teams. So they have either mountain rescue or they have water rescue. So for example, Eckerd has EXAR, Eckerd College Search and Rescue, which is a Coast Guard certified rescue team, typically rescues on the water because they're on a coast. So they also will walk out of the colleges with a lot of experience when they're looking at med schools and law schools. Many of these campuses are close enough or make arrangements for students to be able to be in a city to do an internship with a political campaign, for example. Ursinus, even though it's about just a half an hour from Philadelphia, they're in Collegeville, Pennsylvania, they do a program where you can actually do a semester in Philadelphia. So you go and you live in the city, you take classes in the city, you do an internship in the city to experience that urban living piece, not in a different way, but you're still really affiliated with Ursinus at the same time. So we've talked about, we've talked about some of the life on campus piece, the faculty connection, financial aid, why you can really do science here. We've talked also about the experience of study abroad. Jenna, those are a lot of the pieces that I would typically cover to get us started.
Yeah.
When I share my screen, I can't really tell if there's questions running on the background. So I'm curious if there's something else. I've been done admissions for over 25 years in some shape or form. So I can talk for a long time, which means that I have to remind myself to stop talking and see if there are questions that people have or that you have to maybe guide the discussion.
Yeah, I have a question, and I guess I should have the meeting off with this question, but can you explain a little bit about how this organization came to be and how these schools were selected?
Absolutely, that's a great one. Thank you very much. I should have done that part. So we are about 15 years old, almost 15 years old as an organization, but we have been working together for close to 25 years. We started working together because of a book called Colleges That Changed Lives, and it was written by Loren Pope 3 times. So Loren wrote the first book and revised it twice. After he had passed away, his family hired an author to revise it again. So there have been 4 versions of the book, and in each of those books, 40 schools are profiled. And what Loren really did with his 35 plus years of college counseling and research into education, what he really did was he asked people to look at this process differently. He asked them not to say, how is it ranked, but how does it fit? Not how is, who thinks it's good, but is it good for my child? Is it good for me? Because that's the goal, is for students to be successful. And so we call it a student-centered college search. We call it a student-centered process. We really want this to be about students finding a place that makes sense for them academically and personally, and really gives them an opportunity to be as successful as they can, to become the best them they can be. So I know that I went to a small liberal arts college after a large high school. My high school had 4,000 kids. My college had about 1,100 at the time. And number one, I thought it was going to be really small and feel really small. And it did not feel really small because I did not have 1,100 friends. I knew a lot of people, but I hung out with the same 10 people all the time. And then the other thing I found was that the education was really strong. And I left a better thinker, and I left a better writer. And I still love to learn. I don't like to write papers, I admit that, but I do love to learn. So I think that that's the type of education these schools will give people. Loren Pope really wanted families and students to approach this asking the question, can my child succeed here? Can I succeed here? Will I be challenged? Will I be supported? As opposed to, what's the ranking? Because the ranking only fits you if your criteria are exactly the same as the rankings criteria. So Loren really wanted you to ask different kinds of questions about the search. He really wanted you to really try to figure out which places made sense for the individual student. So we started traveling together unofficially almost 25 years ago. We said, let's try a program and see how it goes. Put up 200 chairs. We were thrilled when 200 people came. And 25 or almost 25 years later, we typically, in a typical year, not in 2020, which is not a typical year in any way whatsoever so far, but in a typical year, we do 24 to 27 programs around the country and try to talk with students about the search, try to remind kids how much they have to offer, and also to give people a chance to learn about these institutions. So Jenna, that's a really long answer for your question, I think. But
no, that was helpful just to give background. So we do have some questions. So let's go from top to bottom. Do smaller colleges have less disability resources to offer, specifically autism programs?
Interesting question and a good question. I don't think less is necessarily the case. I think where you sometimes run into challenges is for something where people will say, well, my child has, or I have executive function disorder. And the way that I'm successful is somebody helps me every day. They remind me to get up. They remind me to go to class. They remind me to do my homework. They remind me to do my papers. I think that that is unlikely to happen at a smaller school. But when it comes to good services overall, I feel very good about these schools. There's a subset that I have heard wonderful things, and I'll run that list in just a second for you. But I think that a lot of these schools, because they are small communities, there's a lot of acceptance of who you are, whomever you are. And there's a recognition that we all learn differently, we all interact differently. But there is also a recognition that you're looking at a small school for a reason. And so you don't often get the opportunity to sort of hide away and just go to class, go home from class, go to class, come home from class. That is not the kind of community that these schools engender. That's not what they want for kids. They want kids to build relationships as well as they can, as often as they can, and hope that those relationships will go forward into the future with them and be lifelong friendships, lifelong mentoring relationships, lifelong networking relationships. So having said all of that, I think that I'll run through a list of schools that I have heard from counselors, parents, and students they feel have done a really good job supporting students who have learning differences. This is not specific to autism, it's just the learning differences in general, if that's all right. So these are the ones that I have heard. Beloit College, Clark University, Cornell College, Earlham College, Eckerd College, Emory and Henry, Goucher, Guilford College, Hendrix College, Hiram College, Juniata College, Knox College, Millsaps College, McDaniel College, Ohio Wesleyan University, Southwestern University, Ursinus College. And those are the ones. Now, it doesn't mean the others are bad. It only means that for some, the reason I didn't mention them is it's more specific. And there are some on that list that I think it varies. It depends on what you need. So for a school like Cornell College that does one class at a time, you have to be able to read pretty quickly because everything happens in 18 days. A full semester happens in 18 days. And so for students for whom reading is a careful but slower process, I think that can be hard. For kids who need the intensity, perfect. I'll use Eckerd College, where I worked for 6 years, as another example. Eckerd is on a coast. It has 1.25 miles of waterfront property. For students who find that they need physical space and activity to get off some of that energy in between events and classes, Eckerd is great. For people for whom the idea that you can go get a kayak down at the waterfront and kayak for an hour is too much distraction, it's not a good fit. So the fit still goes, whether it's about personality, whether it's about finances, whether it's about social life, or whether it's about services. So there's my other long answer.
So I loved Eckerd College. I saw Eckerd College on the Florida Sunshine Tour, and we had a tour on bike, and our tour guide was wearing no shoes. And it just was like such a good representation of Eckerd. It was so laid back. It was Florida, but like a different part of Florida that I never really knew existed. This kind of like little hippie, be who you want to be, go on the water. It was really cool.
And St. Pete is a great city. St. Pete is a lovely city. It's artsy, it's friendly, it is a gay-friendly piece of Florida, because lots of times people think, oh my gosh, it's Florida. Yeah, Florida is not only the weird parts. Florida has some beautiful people and some lovely places and really lovely communities, like St. Pete, Sarasota, where New College is. They're really lovely. And when I moved to Florida, I was in my mid-40s, and people kind of like, oh, are you going to retire? So I dug around, and the average age in St. Pete was only 46. So it's not just retirees. They're there in the winter, but it's not only,
Yeah, St. Pete was the outlier of Florida in a good way.
Yeah, St. Pete's a great city. I really like it.
Florida's great in its own ways too, not to knock Florida. Okay, so can you speak to Greek life at these colleges?
Some yes, some no. So a lot of these schools specifically choose not to have Greek life. Some of them do have Greek life. Lawrence does, OU does, Puget Sound. So some of the schools do have frats and sororities. I think there's, the process of pledging is probably similar, but they're all very careful about making sure that hazing is not an issue. But it's a piece of life on campus. I don't know that any of these schools are dominated by Greek life, as you might find at some other institutions where life is huge.
Okay. What is the typical diversity of these schools?
That's a really good question. I think people are surprised by it. So when I just mentioned earlier that I did a session with St. John's, Hendrix College, Southwestern University, and Austin College. And Austin and Southwestern are both majority-minority institutions. Now they're in Texas, so it tends to be a large Hispanic population, but many of these schools, McDaniel, Denison, Kalamazoo, St. Olaf, a lot of these schools are involved with the POSSE program, or they have other programs, like McDaniel has a program with the City of Baltimore schools, so that they are really, really carefully and specifically looking to recruit more students of color and make sure they feel comfortable on campus, not just to recruit them, but to make sure they feel comfortable on campus. So I know that, like I said, a couple of these schools are majority minority. Probably most of the schools are still majority white. That's probably the case. But I think that there are a lot of these schools that people would be surprised by the diversity on campus.
Somebody asked, I'm really interested in majoring in art history. Which, if any, of these schools are well known for their art history programs?
Art history is always small. Even at big schools, I think it's always a smaller program. But I would look at Goucher. I would look at, get my little list here. I would look at Goucher, Cornell College. Sorry about the silence. I'm just thinking and looking at some things here. I would look maybe at College of Worcester, as well as Rhodes, potentially also Ohio Wesleyan. Now, those are my speculations based on all the things that I read about 44 colleges. So if I'm off one or two, my apologies. But we do have a new search engine on our site where you can pull up by major grouping. So you can pull up art history and take a peek and see who has programs there. But I think that those should help you. And if whomever that question is, if you want to email me later, I will also go ahead and dig up some more information for you if you have specifics. You can always email me. Jenna will have my email, I'm sure, at some point in time up here. And then if
I
not,
can send it to everyone right now.
That's great. And if not, or in addition, you can always go on our website and where it says contact us, you'll basically see my head. And if you click on my head, it'll send me an email and you can ask any of those questions. I'm happy to help and kind of guide you in a direction. I might come back with a couple more questions so that my direction guiding is better. But I think that you'll find a lot of the information that you're looking for on our website as well in that search engine.
Okay, we have a very specific question. Do you have any information on the Reed College's men's rugby program?
No. I know that's a very specific answer, but no, I mean, sometimes I can't dig that deeply into an institution. I will tell you the truth. I'm the person at home that mutters a lot on our listservs, professional listservs, where people will post, does anybody know about this at the school? And I mutter a lot of times, why don't you ask the school? So I would suggest that you go ahead and contact somebody. You can contact Shalini Uppu, Shalini. Her last name is Uppu, Uppu. She's the director of admission. You can contact her directly. Tell her I gave you her name. And I think her email is just uppus@reed.edu. So tell her I gave you her name, and you can contact her and ask her, and I'm certain that she will be helpful.
Isn't Reed known for not having sports specifically?
They may not, but they probably have
rugby.
I don't know that they have Division III, but they probably have club sports.
Right, they do. Yeah, and Google is everyone's best friend in all of this. And I'm going to link to the website, ctcl.org, right?
Yep.
Okay. What are political science courses like?
Well, that's a good question. It's an interesting question. So what's going to happen if you think you're interested in political science is you're going to do a combination no matter how you decide to focus it. What the heck does that mean? So let's say you do poli-sci. Oftentimes a poli-sci program is going to be more American based. So you're going to be looking at American political history, American political processes, but not only American policy and processes. You're going to look at other countries' policies and processes so that you understand how they overlap, intersect, affect one another, how they've, what we have learned from other places, what they have learned from us. But if you start interested in political science, there's a chance that you will drift into international relations. In that case, you're going to be looking at external to the US a lot more, but you're also going to see courses that are on American politics and policy. But you're going to spend a lot more time understanding what's happening in Africa or what's happening in Latin American politics and how is that affected by the history of colonization and how is that affected by movements of indigenous peoples. And so it's going to be more external to the US. Now, you might stay with one of those. You could drift even further into international development, which tends to be looking more at what we would call developing countries. So areas where they are still building infrastructure, or they are still building healthcare to be more similar to what we think of in the West as healthcare and infrastructure now. So I think that your courses will always start bigger and work their way more specific. So you're going to start with perhaps a survey of American politics, but eventually, as you go forward, you may be doing, what's the history of Blacks in America? And given everything that's happening in America, that would be a fascinating course. Or you maybe end up taking courses that are very specific to women in politics in America and where they have been successful and less successful. And at that point in time, say, well, I'm going to compare that to how women have been successful in the European Union, or it is now the European Union, but just used to be independent countries in Europe. So I think that the classes are always going to, any department, going to start big and then narrow down as you start to have more interest in the particular piece of the department. And then you'll see how you start to focus where you go with your classes. And you'll also notice that you start to have a focus on when you have options on a paper. So the professor may say, we're doing this survey of European history and politics, write about, your final paper is something in World War II. Well, heck, you can narrow that down to tiny little slivers, but you can't do, 50 pages on all of World War II. But you can do women in the resistance in France, or you can do, what was the, manufacturers' responsibilities in Germany. What did they do that was ethical? What did they do that was not ethical? So you can narrow it down in ways that you find particularly interesting. And that will happen as you go forward in any department, whether it's biology, chemistry, politics, English, a language, whatever it might be. You will start to narrow it down in ways that make the most sense for you.
Okay. I'm interested in a school that has a lot of outdoor activities or outdoor programs. Can you suggest some from this list?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have my handy dandy little sheet that sometimes, so I don't forget anybody, but absolutely. I would look at, I'm just going down the side, Evergreen State College. I would look at Hendrix College, Hope College. I would look at Emory and Henry, St. John's College in Santa Fe. I would look also at Reed. I would look at Eckerd College. I would look at Whitman, Willamette. Basically, the schools in the Pacific Northwest tend to be just because of the natural way that they are set up. Also, St. Mary's College of California. All of those schools, you'll find that there's a lot of outdoor stuff that happens either right there on campus or very conveniently nearby. St. John's campus in Santa Fe, they have hiking trails that just go right out from campus. So you walk out of an office building and there are hiking trails that just leave right off campus. They have tents, backpacks, they have kayaks, bikes, mountain bikes, all the things you need to go camping and hiking and spend time outside without buying your own, all available for students. And you just go down and sign something out.
Maria, do you have a map that you can put up? I can put it up too.
Yes, I can do it if you want me to, or if you just go to ctcl.com, .org, and there's a map button. Yep.
Okay. Is there a way to see them all laid out?
They sort of bubble over each other, so you've got to scroll in and out a little bit.
Yes. And then,
do you want me to put that up on my screen because I'm actually sharing?
Here, I think if I Google, there's a map.
Yeah, there's definitely a map.
Little pinpoints, right?
Correct. Yep. And then if you just scroll in and out, you'll see that you get a better picture of where the individual institutions are.
Okay, I'll share it. Let's see. So here they all are.
Yep, there you go.
Then I was trying to get a good visual. So there's a lot in the Midwest, a decent amount in the Northeast. Can you, by any chance, while I look at an actual picture, can you name the ones in the Northeast? Because I know we have a lot of Northeast people up here, and somebody.
Yeah, sure. So in the Northeast, you have Hampshire College in Massachusetts, Clark University in Massachusetts. And then you also would have Bard, which is in upstate New York, which is not technically New England, but, oh, you got lost. Uh-oh. That's not a
I
good
had
sign.
it. I can see.
Oh, you went in through Google, that's why. Yeah, that's our old map that we used to use. But you'll see I'm pointing at it on my screen, which doesn't help you in any way at all. But you can see that there are many in Pennsylvania as well, Juniata, Ursinus, and Allegheny in Pennsylvania. So you can see that little piece of the world.
I had one this morning that I found and I put it on my Instagram page. So this is a good plug for my Instagram page of @GetMeIntoCollege. But I found it was really, really, it was a PDF of something, but.
Yeah, it's our old piece that we used to have. That's what you pulled up there. It was our old piece
And
that had the map.
this is the one that
Yep, that's the one. Yep.
This is
Yeah,
old?
that's the one we used to have. It is semi-correct because right now New York State should be colored in because Bard joined us in 2018, and
True.
Vermont should not be colored in because Marlborough has left us because they merged with Emerson College.
There you
Other
go.
than that, it's right.
So we have New York, we have Bard, right? Yep.
Correct. Yep.
So all the ones that are listed here, plus Bard.
Yes, plus Bard.
When
Exactly.
do you think you'll redo the book or an ad?
We don't have any control over the book. The family owns the book. Lauren Pope's family owns everything to do with the book. So anytime there would be a new book, it would be because Lauren's family chose to commission one.
Got it. And and how often do you add schools or remove schools?
We've never removed someone other than Marlborough chose to leave because they merged with Emerson. They would no longer have been really an appropriate member because they weren't at a true liberal arts school anymore. And then we added Bard in 2018 because they were interested in being part of our organization. We were interested in the idea of expanding. They were profiled in earlier books. And so, because our charter members were the ones in the 2006 book, the one that Lauren worked on himself last 2006.
And when you're adding someone, what do you look for?
Well, we don't know. That's why we're not adding anybody at this point in time. Because we'd have to come up with a vetting process. We'd have to come up with a series of questions, a series of points that we felt were important, whatever they were, that we felt were important as an organization, and then figure out who does the vetting and who does the voting. And so we haven't figured out that process yet. In addition, we don't know, for example, if we were to say, okay, we're going to open this up and a counselor like you could nominate a school, the school goes through and answers our questions, but now we want to visit. We want someone to visit. Well, who pays for that? So there's some real practical pieces that come with the idea of expanding, that we haven't figured that out. So at this time, the board is in a position of saying that we will not expand at this time, but we don't know when that will change.
Okay. This is a good question. I've been reading about financial health of colleges and universities. How are these colleges regarding financial health? So there's smaller schools that might not have as big endowments as other schools. So there's a lot going on with COVID. What are people saying in regards to that?
That's a good question. Absolutely. I think it's important to ask as you visit schools too. I think that these schools range. If you grabbed any 44 schools that work together for some reason, like colleges of the Midwest or, those schools that have regional representatives somewhere, you'd find a range. We have wealthier schools and less wealthy schools. But we do have schools that are very thoughtful about how they use their money. There's a lot of conversation, especially with what's happening with the virus and financial aid and families having lost jobs, et cetera. Sort of that, well, why don't they spend the money in their endowment? And just make this easier for people. And part of the challenge is that money in an endowment is often given for a particular purpose. So you can't decide that you're going to take someone's $2 million that they gave for women in science and use it to build your football team or to build your arts program. That money's been earmarked, is legally set aside. So using the money is not always an option. But I think that the schools have been really careful about their financial health. There are a few schools that I think are struggling and that are going to continue to struggle, just like across the country. It's not specific to liberal arts schools. It's not specific to our schools. It is just a question of perception, as well as how willing families are to pay for this kind of experience. You're paying for something very special, but you're paying more than you will pay at a community college, or one of the things we fight against here in California would be the Cal States, and the assumption that the UCs will always be less expensive, which is not a fair assumption and not always true.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, people don't realize that the sticker price doesn't always show what it's going to be in the end, and that the school could actually be less than, for our state, a school like Rutgers.
Yep.
So it's something to think about, and to fill out the EFC calculator, or the net price calculator, I'm sorry, to figure out your estimated family contribution, and to apply and look at their scholarships and how much financial aid that they distribute. So
Absolutely.
it end up being cheaper in the end, which is really sweet. All right, this is an interesting question, and maybe there's some other schools that fit this. McDaniels is on your list, but it's not on the list of Princeton Review's the best 382 colleges lists. Oh, how we love rankings. Why should someone look at this school?
Why not? Princeton has 382. There are almost 3,000 schools in this country. To assume that their ranking is the only way to go with this is, it's sort of like that thing where people will say, you know, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. It's just one tool. You know, there's a lot of schools that aren't on that list. There are schools that are on that list that are going to be a terrible match for a particular student. It doesn't matter if it's highly ranked, if it's not a good fit for you. If you're not going to thrive there, if you're going to struggle, if you're not going to find your people, if you're not going to find a group of faculty and students that you love being with every day, doesn't matter how well it's ranked. If you hate being in the city, if you are a person that cities scare you, scare is a big word, not a big word, but you just don't like them. You don't like the smell, you don't like the noise, you don't like the sound. Why apply to Columbia? Because it's an Ivy? So? If you're a person who hates being in a small town, you don't want to be where there are more trees than people, why apply to Dartmouth? Because it's an Ivy? It's in Hanover, New Hampshire. It's beautiful there. There are way more trees than people. Way more cows probably than people. A ranking is just one thing. I don't see why that's a be-all, end-all, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just to take it from the counselor perspective, it's all about the fit and your happiness. And far too many people transfer out of these quote unquote brand name schools and end up transferring because it wasn't a good fit for them in the first place. So I always think it's funny when I have students that say, I want to apply to every Ivy. And I'm like, well, do you want to be in New Hampshire or New York City? To your point, like it's all about where do you want to be and what place you want to be. And these schools are going to provide you with such good attention that you might not get it at other schools that are on that list. So it's so much about what you do with the school that you have and what's a good fit for you. And I can't express that enough. And it's just all about like academically and socially and financially what makes you happy and thrive. And that's what
There's a bunch of research that shows it's not truly about where you go, it's what you do when you're there. It truly is a good education at so many places that don't happen to be Ivies. There are 8 Ivies, and they came together as an athletic league. And we as a culture have put them on a pedestal like the Greek gods that we all studied in 8th grade. And they're not perfect. They're not the be-all, end-all. They are one tiny subset of all the schools in this country. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. It seems that these colleges allow for greater flexibility in choice of classes. How do they make the process less overwhelming for a freshman?
That's a good question. Many of them do. Not all of them offer a lot of flexibility. So, for example, St. John's College does not offer a lot of flexibility. Everybody does the same thing. And you all start with what's considered the great canon of Western thinkers. So you start with Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, and you work your way forward through the ages. And the fascinating part is if you are reading Socrates and Plato and Aristotle at that point in time, you can't bring in somebody from the 18th or 19th century because you're not there yet as a group. So they are very structured in the way that they do their great books education. Many of the other schools are much more fluid. For example, Evergreen State College, Hampshire College, much more fluid. You actually have to build your own program at Hampshire. You have College of faculty advisors, and you build your own program. None of these schools will leave you on your own. No one's going to throw you a catalog in the old vernacular. No one's going to just say, here's the website for our catalog. Sorry. And say, go ahead and find your way. Everyone will have at least one advisor, probably two in the beginning. So one that's assigned based on a first-year class, and then one that in a major you think you might want to be in. And then once you declare a major, you will have a faculty advisor in that department, plus any others that you find on your own. Somebody that you clicked with really well in the art department, but you're going to be an art minor, and you're going to be a science major, so you have an official major advisor, but then you hang on to this person in the art department because they've given you really good advice and you like the way that they make you think about what you think you want to do. So they're giving you that other perspective, which is really helpful. But no one's going to leave you on your own. They're all going to have an orientation program. They're all going to have a way for you to make connections on campus in career services as a first-year student, as a first semester student, as a first week student probably, or first month. They're going to connect you to career services. Figure out how to help you connect to alumni resources and networking opportunities. They're going to have people that will guide you through how to pick housing and how to think about where you want to be involved on campus. Do you want to pledge a frat or sorority or don't you? All of that guidance is going to happen. The official guidance, the unofficial guidance of other students as well. Nobody leaves you out there on your own. Not at all.
I just looked at something at this list and got confused. Are these two St. John's colleges the same?
Yes,
I mean, besides location, are they affiliated with each other?
They are. They're the same school. They just got two campuses.
I did not know that. You learned something new. I've heard Santa Fe, New Mexico is awesome.
It is. It's a cool city. It's a really cool city. And their campus is lovely.
On my bucket list. All right, we have two major specific questions. Do any of these colleges have strong journalism or digital storytelling programs?
You'll see a lot of journalism at Allegheny, at Whitman, at Goucher, Puget Sound, Denison, perhaps Lawrence as well. One thing to think about if you are thinking about traditional journalism, and since the question came both ways, the digital and not digital, I'm going to say this. I've read a lot and I've heard a lot and talked to people about getting into journalism. And it's pretty interesting because what they will typically say is you need to know a topic that you can write about. So a newspaper will hire someone to be their political science writer. So back to our political science example earlier. But they don't want to teach you about American politics. They'll teach you how to write for a newspaper. They will teach you how to make connections and how to do the research perhaps. But they're not going to teach you American politics. They want you to come to them with that knowledge. So typically, I would suggest to people that you major in something you would love to write about, that you would love to study all the time. You would love to basically be a student of that topic all the time. So whether it's culture in America or European culture or science or the environment or agricultural environment, whatever it might be that you're interested in, tourism, if that's what you're interested in, you need to learn as much as you can about that and learn to write well. Learn to write articles that capture somebody right away. In our busy world, you need to get somebody in those first 5 sentences or they're done with you. That was nice. Thanks so much. I don't want to play anymore. But really, understanding what you might want to write about is incredibly important. I have found in everything that I've read about journalism and just being a human that absorbs media. I think that is very, very important, especially in the quickness of our culture now.
What schools on the list are best known for their biological science majors?
I'm not going to answer that one specifically because I need more information from the student. Because what I mean is that there's 44 schools. I would say 40 of them are good, and probably 25 of them I think are great at science. Okay. Now, are you more conservative or more liberal? Do you want to be in a town? Do you want to be in a city? Is there something you do outside class that you love that you really want to continue with? Without those three answers, it's hard for me to narrow it down a lot because so many of these schools do a good job. But you can do biology and really feel good about the sciences at McDaniel and be in a place that is probably kind of centrist, not super conservative, not super liberal, very strong Division III athletics, but not in the city. And if the city living thing is super important to you, then it doesn't fit. And so that's where it gets tricky to make recommendations without having a little bit more information. And I know I've done it for things like art history, and I've done it for learning differences and things like that. So I'm not trying to be my own little hypocritical party here. But what I'm trying to say is that for something big where so many of these schools do a good job with science and a really good job with science, it's hard for me to say, look at them without getting a little bit more information from the student.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay, so we have no more questions, but I guess just for the last final thoughts, who would fit in well to a school that's on the Colleges That Change Lives list, and maybe who would not?
I think if you want to be anonymous, if you want to hide in big classes and big res halls, these are not your schools. Don't do it. They're not the right place. If you want to sit in a big classroom and listen and only interact if you drive that interaction, these are not your schools. But if you want to be in a place where you can be connected really quickly, where you will not get lost, you would have to make an effort to get lost in the shuffle. If that's what you want, these schools are a really good choice. But anonymity does not happen on a campus of 1,100. It's really hard to make that happen. And so if that's really what you want, and that's the way that you learn best, is really only making that interaction happen if it's a really important issue to you, if it's super duper, super important or super hard, or you're really lost. If you need it then, and that's the only time you want it, this is not your campus. These are not your campus, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. This is really helpful. Any final thoughts?
No, I mean, if I can help, come through the website, email me. I'd be happy to help as much as I can. The website has a lot of information, as does our Twitter feed, which is just CTCL Colleges, and our Instagram, which is CTCL Colleges, or Facebook for the older people in your life who still go to Facebook like me. You can they can just go to Colleges That Change Lives. And there's lots of good information. I will say that of all the people that I have met in the 25 years that I have done this kind of work, almost 26 years, these are really good people. They want to help. They want to help you know their school, but they want to help. And they will tell you the truth. Oh, no, we really can't do that. No. But I know a school where you can. And that referral process is great. And I think it surprises families a lot that people will refer them somewhere else. So these are good people. They will help you.
Yeah. Well, we need that in this time. So everyone, kindness and helpfulness, it's great. So thank you, Maria. And this was a great overview. And for everyone who missed something, her email and the website is on the chat. So definitely, if you have any questions, send them her way. And I hope that you will all be able to visit these schools in the near future, because they are, yeah, hopefully, because they are great. Someone just wrote, this was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
So great job. And I would say have a good night, but I guess it's only 4 o'clock. So have an almost great night.
Thank you.
And I'll keep in touch. Thank you. All
right. Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Good luck.